Hello. Can I remove my mask now?
Absolutely. We want to see your pretty face.
Well, sleepy face because it's 8:15 in the morning. Thank you very much. No, thank you. I've been watching the program for the last half an hour with very disturbing stories, inspiring stories. And I think what Narika is doing is really phenomenal. Domestic violence is such a hushed up thing. And while you said, Renu, that we have to only look at the word violence and not domestic, but what it has done is that domestic has been seen as a private matter, but it's as much a public concern. It's very much a human rights issue. And that's why probably it's, in fact, during this time, it's being called the shadow pandemic. And so, the fact that we've all come together to raise funds, to create awareness, to give strength to women to tell their stories, to sort of remove this culture of silence around it, I think is absolutely much needed. So I'm very, very happy and delighted and honored to support Narika in this venture.
Thank you, Nandita. And it's truly an honor and a pleasure. And I know when I found out I was getting the opportunity to interview you, I did a lots of bunga in my room. Let me tell you, I was way too excited. So we have a lot of
Thank
questions
you.
from you, and I want to encourage the audience that if you want to submit your questions, feel free to do so in the chat window, and our Narika panelists will definitely let us know, and we'll try and squeeze in as many questions as we have and we can get. So I want to begin by some of the questions that we have for you, Nandita. So one of my first
Sure.
ones is what has inspired you to raise awareness about domestic violence in your film Listen to Her? If you could explain that.
Yes. So those of you who don't know, Listen to Her is a 7-minute film. It's on YouTube. I have kept no copyright. It's open source. Anybody can, download it, see it. If you want to do it in another language, go ahead, get in touch with me. So during the pandemic and the beginning, especially, there were all these stories of the migrant workers who are having to go back to their villages and the trauma that they were going through, the how the city that they built was in fact shunning them away, and one was just feeling very helpless, and at the same time almost guilty of the privilege of being at home and being safe. And the slogan that "Stay home, stay safe" suddenly seemed like one of the biggest privileges one had. And then the stories about domestic violence started increasing and coming out in hushed voices, that it had really increased. All the helplines were jammed. So that was extremely disturbing. That even "stay home, stay safe," there is an irony to it, because if you are stuck at home with your perpetrator of violence, if you're sort of locked at home with your abuser, how safe are you? And this is not just for the women but also for the children, and women are therefore doubly concerned for their own life and for the lives of their children. Also, women were being completely overburdened by work across class. Women had to shoulder all the responsibilities of their lives, of their families, and many lived in joint families. So these two issues kind of really brought out the irony of "stay home, stay safe." And I was still very privileged. I have help at home. I'm a single mother, so at least I don't have anyone ordering me around. I have a 10-year-old child. But yet I was kind of juggling as well with all these Zoom calls, trying to support different organizations, working, taking care of my kid, and despite being so privileged. So I thought I needed to respond to it, and it was a very spontaneous response. It wasn't thought through. In films, usually you need a lot more planning. But here I literally wrote a 7-page script one morning and just shot it with my phone. And with my phone, I didn't even have a tripod to set it right. And yeah, I just spontaneously responded to this crisis that we weren't really talking about. And I was glad that I could do that, because like you're getting many comments, my YouTube and other Facebook and everywhere, women were sharing their stories. Many wanted
Right.
helpline numbers across the country, so I started collating those numbers and put that up in social media. So yeah, it was just my own helplessness of feeling that I wasn't being able to do anything, and my own desire to want to respond to a crisis as big as this.
That's wonderful. And a lot of listeners have been asking. It's a short 7-minute movie called Listen to Her. Moving
If you
on,
could put the
Nandita.
link, it would be great. If somebody could,
Yes, if we
from
can
your
maybe put the
team,
link out there
just
so
put the
everybody can
link.
definitely go and
Yeah,
visit it.
then
Yes,
more
I
can
assume it's
watch
on
it.
YouTube then, right?
It's
I
on
assume it's on
YouTube.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
You've used so many different forms of media for your social activist film, from TED Talks, plays, videos. What do you think has been the most effective way of raising awareness and getting this message out, in your personal opinion?
I think every medium has its own advantages and disadvantages. I wouldn't really compare. I remember the first time that I actually engaged with any social issue was through street theater. When I was college, I was 17, idealistic, and I thought every play was changing the world. Because you make eye contact, you go into factories, you go into slums, you go into offices, and just perform. And you talk about issues of gender, you talk about issues of violence, you should talk about economic issues, education, etc. And there was a direct connect. And then over the years, I've of course used many other different mediums, whether it was writing a column, like you had said in my intro. So that was also not just cathartic that I could talk about anything, but I would actually meet people who would share their views on it or felt that it resonated with them. So theater has, proscenium play has a different power because you're in a closed hall and you really feel, you
Right.
take, so you feed off the energy of the audience and they respond to it in a very sort of visceral way. Then you have the screen, which is in a way a flat screen. The audience is not even there. And yet, as an audience, I mean, all of us watch films and series, and we know sometimes how close it is to our lives or to something that we are transported to another world. So I think every medium has its pros and cons, and we should not undermine even talking to your, like sometimes people feel like, oh, you're in the public space, you have a larger influence. I think all of us have a circle of influence, and we should make use of that to share our thoughts and ideas and concerns, and sort of expand on them. So we have families, we have friends, so don't lose any opportunity to share how you feel about things, because it's silence is the most dangerous thing. And Martin Luther King had said that in our times we will repent not for the evil deeds of the bad, but for the silences of the good. So, I really often remember that quote, that we have to sort of remove the veil of that silence.
Absolutely. There's a question that's actually come from the panelists. It said, "What inspired you to make Farak?"
Yeah,
Nilofer
Farah.
Ansari.
So Farak was my first film in 2008. I'm a hesitant actor, hesitant director. It was never a main ambition. Till date, it remains more as a means to an end. But in Gujarat, when in 2002, when we had the Gujarat riots, it was the first time that, we saw images. There was 24/7 television had just begun, and we were actually seeing these images of violence. And when I went to Gujarat and spoke to various people, and also many of my friends were doing work there, I was also doing it in Delhi. I did a series of talks called Identity and the Notion of the Other, and how we other people. And I realized that after the talk, the Q&A or the discussion was always so polarized. And, there's so much of prejudice. And I think it has unfortunately only increased over the years. Identity politics is being played out everywhere in the world. And I think that sort of deeply disturbed me. And what I was really concerned with was not only the acts of violence, because we have seen them, and in some ways we have glamorized violence in cinema, but what lingers on after violence. And I think it's true of also domestic violence. It's not just the physical abuse, but what it does to the mind and the heart and psychologically. And that's what I wanted to really tackle, that when the violence was over, what were people grappling with? And that's how Firak was born. And it was a very difficult film, especially as a first film for someone who hadn't, sort of studied cinema or assisted anybody. But I think life experiences come handy in telling a story that, it felt very personal at many levels.
There's I've been following and I'm a big fan of you, but one of the big issues that I share with you is the color bias that we have. What advice would you give to our younger self, women of color in this world? Because, and it's especially, it's huge in our, the Asian community, the
Yeah, it's
bias against
everywhere.
color. It's, yeah. What is
Yeah.
your take on that?
In 2013, when Women of Worth, this NGO that came to me, they had started this campaign called Dark is Beautiful, and I just sort of supported it, and by default I became the face of it because most actresses were getting lighter and lighter skinned with every film. And so I sort of became the face of it, and I started realizing that it really needed a standalone attention. While I, of course, I knew about the issue because being a woman of color, you're constantly reminded of in some way or the other. But so many women came up to me and talked about it, and I think what I would just say that it's something you're born with, whether it's the religion, it's the nationality, it's your nose or your hair or
Mhm.
your skin color. These are your given identities. You've done nothing for it. So let nobody make you feel sort of any less than anyone else because of something that you're just born with. What we have to identify with is who we are as people. How are we using our time? What are our interests? What are our passions? What are our concerns? How we think, how we behave? I know how do we care for people? So I think that's what, do we have empathy or not? How are we expressing ourselves through different mediums? So what we do with our life is what we have to, that's our identity, not we're just what we are born with. So once we have that confidence, once we do things that we feel are enriching us and others around us, then we will stop caring about these identities that people thrust on us. So don't let anyone thrust any identity on you, and create your own.
One of the questions coming from the audience is, it's an anonymous question. She says, I'd like to hear Nandita's views on emotional violence in the South Asian community. We are sometimes told that emotional abuse is not an issue at all and we should ignore it. Can we hope that this issue will actually be accepted ever as a problem in the Indian society?
It is a fact that, in more traditional, patriarchal, feudal societies, there's a lot that gets sort of shoved under the carpet. And women are so sort of low down in that hierarchy of things, and you have a shorter end of the stick, that even when physical abuse is not sort of responded to or anything is done about it, emotional abuse is not even considered. But emotional abuse can scar you just as much. So even in that small 7-minute film, and listen to her, I've talked about this woman who's going through domestic violence, but this other woman who is, someone like me, someone like us, educated, more urban, and all of that, but is going through an emotional abuse because overburdening of work is also a kind of an abuse where you are not able to do anything in a focused way, and someone's going to tell you like, come on, you're so privileged, what's your problem, what are you talking about, but it's something that men take for granted. So emotional abuse definitely is something that needs a lot more attention. So I would just say that please do share that. Like, we sometimes feel guilty of even sharing those abuses. We think, oh, it's too small. Am I going to be called a feminist? Am I going to be told that I'm trying to play the victim? Am I making a big deal about it? We are constantly asked to shut up, whether in a family situation or outside. So I would tell every woman or anybody who's being feeling abused, because that feeling is real. It's not for anyone else to judge whether that's big or small or important or not. So I think let's create also a sense of sisterhood. We need help. There is no shame in seeking help, and there are people out there who want to help. So give those who want to help an opportunity to help. So, yes, definitely do not shy away from sharing your emotional, psychological abuse. That's just as important as a scar that you can see on the body.
Absolutely. Are you currently acting, directing, or producing any films right now that you
Not,
could
I
share
mean,
with
I'm
us?
writing, I do take time in writing, and there are so many stories that kind of are vying for your attention because there's so much happening around us in society, in the world, that is of such deep concern that, you're kind of, in these 6 months, I must have done more than five, like, I don't know, maybe more than 50, 60 webinars, and I'm kind of webinared out completely. But I just feel that this is also a way to connect and share stories, and because so many people have inspired me and whatever little I can do, and also they enrich my own understanding of the human predicament. But so writing has been low, but yes, I have begun writing a story, and hopefully in a few months, or I don't know when this pandemic is going to get over, but sometime next year I hope that I can shoot and bring to you another story that has a heart, and also kind of reaches the head, because it's when it's both, that's when I think it creates a small shift, and after all, these personal shifts then create hopefully a collective shift.
I love to watch those meaningful movies. They make a lot of sense and they definitely motivate and inspire people.
But we
What,
need more audiences for it.
yes. In this world of online tools and platforms of communication and dating, that's what everybody's in right now. They just want to sit on apps, they want to date people. What advice would you give to women and youth? I mean, we heard the story today about the lady who read an ad from an NRI. What is your advice to all the young women out there that are trying to date and meet people and they're using these apps in hope of that search of a life partner?
Well, I mean, I don't know what to advise because these are very personal matters. Each one responds differently, and there are no rules about love and relationships. So, I would just say that the digital medium is a neutral medium. You can do good things with it, you can do bad things with it. Look at our social media, you can be trolled badly, you can actually have really meaningful connections, and you can
Yes.
sort of join the dots with like minded people. So, it's really what you do. I'm not going to denigrate any medium. Of course, I'm still maybe old school. I just think human connection and real conversations and conversation that has depth. What the
Right.
digital medium has done is it's kind of narrowed everything into sound bites, and it has also created a false sense of us with these Snapchats and these DPs and all that. We put ourselves in the way we don't even look, and we are constantly having to posture and create a self that we are not. So I think the more authentic you are, the more authentic response you will get. Because otherwise, you're going to get a response that is not going to last long because they are responding to a self that is
Yes.
not you. So I think it's good to bear yourself and be yourself. And I think authenticity is extremely important in whatever you do, and more so definitely in relationships. For me, work life, they're not so separate. So I would say just authenticity in everything, even if it takes time, even if you have to stumble and fall a few times, at least you'll know the real thing and not something that is not even real to begin with. So yeah, so find ways to sort of also dig deeper into these things, so that when you actually meet the right person, they're liking you, they're loving you, they're caring for you with all of blemishes and warts, because we also have those, but at least they're coming into this relationship for the right reason.
Beautifully said. I mean, I'm still old school as well. I feel, human connection is far more important. In your TED talk, Nandita, A Mother's Journey with Anger, you underscore the importance of disarming anger with love. As you know, it can be very difficult to do when you're feeling angry with yourself. Can you share an example of how you have confronted anger with love?
Yeah, I can't say that I've overcome it. I still get angry from time to time, but less and less. And I've really worked on it, because as a young person, I was very angry about things that bothered me. I was very judgmental. I was a bit righteous. I also kind of justified anger because it was against injustice, and it was against things that were not authentic. It was against everything that was bad. And in some ways, my friends and family also sort of liked it, in the sense they felt that I was passionate about things, that I was angry for, like I said, for the right reasons. But over the years, just seeing so much violence in the world in so many forms, I feel anger is also a step towards that violence. And also, it comes from the place of righteousness. It comes from the place, I'm more right than you. And when you do that, you're not empathetic, you're not listening, and you're not finding a more constructive way to deal with it. And I realized this when I became a mother, and I could see those flashes of anger in my child. And I knew that, how does a child even know this emotion of anger if he or she hasn't seen it? And I realized that he was, in a way, without realizing it, just sort of, because children are like sponges, he was just emulating me. And that's when I realized that how detrimental and how futile anger is. And what do you replace it with? You can sometimes replace it with sadness, you sometimes replace it with love, sometimes empathy, sometimes concern, thoughtfulness, awareness. And it's a journey. You can never say that you'll never be angry, and it must replace itself with something constructive. So it doesn't mean you're less passionate or you don't care when there is injustice. Of course you do, but anger is not going to change that. You have to really engage with it. You have to find a way. You have to move towards the solution. So yeah, that's what I would say, that when I get angry, I still get angry, but I come down and I sort of come back and level myself and kind of find that equilibrium much faster now than I used to, let's say, 10 years ago or 20
I
years
never
ago.
think
So
you
it's a
would get
work in
angry. You look
progress.
very calm and
Oh,
sharp.
yeah. Well, I have no
So,
reason to be angry right now. Such wonderful people and such great
yes,
questions.
absolutely. Well, in closing, I know we just have a few more minutes. So, my last question to you is when
There was
people
one
think,
question here that I'd like to address if we have
sure,
2 minutes. It was
yes, of
about
course.
marital rape,
Oh,
because
yes,
we often don't talk about it. I think it's a very important question also in the context of
feel
domestic
free.
violence.
Please go ahead.
Somebody had
Yes.
asked, sorry, it's gone up. I don't know where it is, but
I think it was what are
somebody
your
had
thoughts
asked
about
about,
marital rape?
yeah, in India or something like
Yes,
that.
yes.
Well, it's everywhere. Marital rape is still being debated. It's strange because, in a way, marriage is supposed to give you the legitimacy to do what you want. After all, it's your husband, and even though you're being abused, you're not supposed to speak against it. So marital rape is still rape. In fact, I did a film, slightly more mainstream film for me, but hatke, as they say, a little more alternate for the director and the others, called Ux. And it was with Mr. Bachchan, and I was playing his wife. And they asked me, in fact, to be part of the writing work, because at that time I didn't want to do the film initially. And the director, Rakesh Om Prakash Mehra, said, "Why don't you become part of the writing process?" And I talked about marital rape, and I tell my husband that, you raped me, because he was very abusive. And initially there was a lot of conversation like, you can't tell your husband you raped me. And this I'm talking about in 2000, when it was being talked even less. And I said, yes, but he did. So, even though, I mean, the whole story was he has another soul getting into him, etc. But the point was, we have to talk about it more openly, and sort of call it out and give it a name, because it is a very grave form of abuse. And just because you're married, you're not allowed to be, being so
Right.
abusive. In fact, if that's your partner, he should be the first person who should not be doing that. So definitely, please break the silence around it.
And my last question to you in closing, because I know we have to wrap up, is when people think
Yes.
about Nandita Das, the words are inspiring, phenomenal, strong. As a child, did you know this is how you were going to be?
Nobody knows what you're going to be, right? So, and whatever your childhood is, that becomes your normal. I only later got to know that my childhood was not so normal, because my father is a painter, my mother a writer. I was given a lot of freedom to question and to be myself, and that was such a luxury and privilege. I got to know only later. I could study what I wanted to. I was exposed to a lot of different arts. There was a, without knowing any isms, whether it was feminism or whether it's secularism, and without knowing any isms, they were just naturally very inclusive. And all of those great issues that I got to understand and give a name to much later. So I'm very, very grateful for that childhood. Somebody, I'm sorry, but these questions I find are very, very pertinent. Somebody's talking about misogyny. So just to kind of wrap it up, I know it's not a
Please
great
go
word to
ahead.
wrap it up,
There are
but
so
I
many
just
questions.
feel
Feel
that
free to
yes,
answer. Yeah.
no, just because I think these are such important questions and we don't talk about it, and they are all interconnected. There's so much misogyny in our country, of course, but world over as well. It is coming out, is manifesting in the way women are being hounded in public, the kind of media trial we are doing against women that we would never do against men, the kind of trolling. I've myself experienced a lot of it. So there is definitely a lot of misogyny that is sort of almost omnipresent. And when we talk about it, we kind of call it out, and we help in at least bringing it out and not normalizing it. So much of misogyny has been normalized. So again, I would just sort of end it with that, let's remove this culture of silence. And for that, we don't have to be angry. We don't have to become like, we don't, like modern women sometimes feel like, do we have to become like men? We don't need to. We can keep our nurturing, beautiful, feminine. When I say, I want to believe that every person has a masculine and feminine. So, keep that beautiful, nurturing quality. And yet, with strength and with confidence, we have to call out these various forms of abuse, not just for ourselves, but also for others when we see that happening around us. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's been such an honor. And
Thank
this
you,
is an
Rennu.
evening I probably will never forget for the rest of my life. I'm such a big fan of yours.
Thank
And right
you.
after this, I'm going to go on all your films back again to watch. But thank you so much, Nandita, on behalf of
So thank you,
Narika. And
Narika, for sort of getting me to participate in this and share my thoughts because I deeply care about these things, and to be able to share, it's also a reaffirmation of your own pledge towards what you're saying. So thank you again. I'll have to go. I have a 10-year-old, and as we women juggle a lot, so I would have loved to see the rest of it, but hopefully it'll be online. And
for
please do
sure.
donate. Yes, I want to make that call at the end that do donate, do support, do volunteer. Let's all do the best we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Over back to you, Raj. I've had the honor of, I took it away from you. I had the honor of interviewing this
No,
beautiful woman for today. So
she is amazing. And gosh, I just, and both of you are just such great examples